When my son heard the doctors say I had only 3 days left, he held my hand, smiled, and said, "Finally, this day has come, old man. The 60 million is mine." I'm not sure what I expected in that moment. Maybe shock, maybe denial, maybe some small flicker of hope that I'd misheard him, that the morphine drip I wasn't even on yet had somehow scrambled my brain. But no. The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire, thick and unmistakable. The doctors had just left. Dr. Patel and some younger resident whose name I didn't catch. They'd delivered the news with that practiced sympathy doctors learn in medical school, the kind that says, "We care," but really means, "We've done this 100 times, and we'll do it 100 more." Possible heart failure. Complications from years of construction work, bad diet, stress. They needed more tests, but preliminary results suggested I had maybe 72 hours if things went south fast. I'd felt Margaret's hand tighten on my arm when they said it. She didn't cry. Margaret never cried in front of doctors. She just squeezed my arm hard enough that I felt her wedding ring press into my skin. Then the doctors left to give us some privacy, and that's when my son made his move. James, 36 years old, MBA from Wharton, corporate consultant who wore $1,000 suits and $200 haircuts. He'd driven up from Boston the moment Margaret called him, made it to the hospital in 90 minutes flat. I'd actually felt touched when he walked through the door, breathing hard like he'd run up the stairs instead of taking the elevator. "Dad," he'd said, his voice breaking just right. "Dad, I'm here." He'd hugged me, held me like he meant it. Even Margaret had softened a little, though she'd been giving James the cold shoulder for months after he'd suggested, again, that maybe it was time we simplified our lives and moved into an assisted living facility. She'd shut that down fast, but the suggestion had lingered between us like a bad smell. The doctors explained everything again for James's benefit. He'd nodded seriously, asked intelligent questions about treatment options and timelines. He'd played the concerned son perfectly. And then, the moment the door clicked shut behind Dr. Patel, his whole face changed. The worry melted away. The tension in his shoulders relaxed, and he smiled. Not a sad smile, not a brave smile, a genuine ear-to-ear Christmas morning smile. That's when he said it. "Finally, this day has come, old man. The 60 million is mine." Margaret's hand went rigid on my arm. I felt her whole body tense like a drawn bowstring. But she didn't say anything. Neither did I. We just stared at him. James pulled his hand back from mine and straightened his tie. "I've been waiting for this for years, you know. You and Mom, living in that house, sitting on all that money like some kind of dragons guarding a cave. Do you know what I could do with 60 million? The deals I could make? The life Katie and I could have?" Katie, his wife, the social media influencer who'd racked up 200,000 Instagram followers by posting pictures of herself in designer clothes and exotic locations. The woman who'd looked at our house, the house Margaret and I had built ourselves, literally, with our own hands and a construction crew back in 1987, and called it quaint, in a tone that meant outdated. "James," Margaret said quietly. Just his name, nothing else. He barely glanced at her. "Don't start, Mom. You know it's true. You're both old. It's time. The estate goes to me. You'll probably follow him within the year anyway, statistically speaking. Widows don't last long." I found my voice. It came out rougher than I intended, scraped raw by the shock. "Get out." "What?" "Get out of this room, now." James laughed. Actually laughed. "Are you serious? Dad, come on. I'm just being honest. Isn't that what you always taught me? Tell the truth, James. Face reality, James." "Well, here's reality. That's just facts." "Out." Margaret stood up. All 5'3" of her, white hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing the same kind of sensible slacks and blouse she'd worn for decades. She moved between James and my hospital bed like a terrier guarding its owner. "Get out before I call security." "You wouldn't." Watch me. They locked eyes. I'd seen Margaret face down union negotiators, building inspectors, and once, memorably, a black bear that wandered into our backyard. She'd stood on the back porch with a broom and yelled at it until it left. James might have forgotten that his mother had spine made of rebar, but I hadn't. He broke first, rolled his eyes like a teenager instead of a grown man. Fine, whatever. I'll come back tomorrow when you're both thinking more clearly, maybe after Dad's had time to process everything. He left. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't look back. Just walked out of that hospital room like he'd just finished a successful business meeting. The silence after the door closed felt heavy enough to crush bones. Margaret sat back down, smoothed her slacks, took a breath, then another. "Margaret," I started. "Don't." She held up one hand. "Not yet. Let me think." So I let her think. That's what you do when you've been married almost 4 decades. You learn when to talk and when to shut up and let your wife process. I watched her face work through it, shock, anger, hurt, and finally settling into something colder, something calculating. After 5 minutes, she spoke. "How much do you trust Luther?" Luther Brennan, my old foreman from back in the day, when I'd run Brennan Construction. No relation, just coincidence on the name. Luther had worked for me for 20 years before I retired and sold the business. He'd moved on to running his own logistics company, something to do with supply chain management that I didn't fully understand but knew was successful. We'd stayed friends, got together once a month for coffee and complaints about getting old. "With my life," I said. "Why?" "Because I think we're going to need him." Margaret pulled out her phone. And Shauna, too, probably. Maybe even Dale. "What are you planning?" She looked at me then, really looked at me. Her eyes were dry but fierce. "If our son thinks he's getting $60 million by waiting for you to die, he's about to learn a very expensive lesson about patience." "Margaret, no." She shook her head. "Don't you dare tell me to let it go. Don't you dare say it doesn't matter. Our son, our only child." My throat felt tight. "I know. So we're going to do something about it." "What exactly?" She smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I'm going to call Luther. You're going to rest. And tomorrow, when James comes back to check on you, we're going to start showing him exactly what happens when you count chickens before they hatch." I should have argued. Should have said something about forgiveness or family or taking the high road. But you know what? I didn't want to. He'd smiled about it, and Margaret was right. That kind of thing doesn't get a pass just because we share DNA. "Call Luther," I said. She did, right there in the hospital room, while nurses bustled past outside and machines beeped their steady rhythms around us. I heard her half of the conversation. "Luther, it's Margaret." "No, not good. Listen, I need a favor. Can you come by tomorrow morning? Bring everything you remember about James's business dealings." "Yes, I'm serious." "No, I'll explain when you get here." "Luther, trust me on this." "Thank you." She hung up and looked at me. "He'll be at the house at 9. "What about Shauna?" Shauna Martinez lived 2 doors down. She'd lived on our street for 15 years and knew everyone's business within a 6-block radius. She wasn't malicious about it, just curious and talkative in that way where information flowed through her like water through a sieve. If you wanted to know who was getting divorced, who lost their job, or who was sneaking around with someone else's spouse, you asked Shauna. She'd tell you everything over coffee and homemade cookies. You think they've been talking? James married a woman who makes her living by posting her life online. Of course they've been talking. And if Katie's been bragging about an inheritance... Margaret's smile turned sharp. Well, Shauna will know. The rest of that day was a blur of more tests, more doctors, more poking and prodding. Dr. Patel came back around 6 with slightly better news. The initial readings might have been off. Maybe a week, maybe a month, maybe longer with treatment. Margaret took that information like a general receiving intelligence reports, nodded, asked questions, thanked the doctor politely, didn't mention that our son had already started planning my funeral. They set me up in a regular room for the night. Margaret stayed until visiting hours ended at 8, then kissed my forehead and told me to get rest. "Tomorrow," she said, "we start working." I didn't sleep much, partly because hospital beds are universally uncomfortable and the patient in the next room snored like a chainsaw, mostly because I kept replaying James's words in my head, that smile, that casual cruelty. Finally, this day has come. $60 million. That's what I was worth to him, not Dad, not the guy who taught him to throw a baseball, not the man who'd sat up with him all night when he had pneumonia at age 7. Just a number with a lot of zeros attached. Around 3 in the morning, a thought occurred to me. I fumbled for my phone on the bedside table. They'd brought my personal effects up from the ER and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I wanted. Harris and Associates, my financial management firm, the people who'd been handling my investments and estate planning for the last 20 years. I typed out an email. "David, need to meet ASAP, want to discuss changes to estate plan, call me tomorrow, Richard." Then I sent another email, this one to my lawyer. "Bob, same deal, estate planning changes, call me." I hit send on both and lay back in the uncomfortable hospital bed. Outside my window, I could see the lights of the hospital parking lot, and beyond that, the dark outline of the New England hills against the night sky. I'd lived in this area my whole life, built hundreds of houses here, knew every back road and shortcut. This was my home, and my son couldn't wait for me to leave it. My phone buzzed, a text from Margaret. "Talk to Shauna. Call me tomorrow morning. Important." I texted back, "Can't sleep anyway. Call now if you're up." She called 30 seconds later. "You should be resting," she said by way of greeting. "You should be sleeping," I countered. Shauna talked. "And?" Margaret's voice went flat. "Katie's been posting on Instagram about exciting changes coming soon and new chapters. She posted a picture of a yacht yesterday with the caption, 'Dreaming of Summer.' The yacht costs $3 million to charter, Richard." I looked it up. Jesus. That's not all. Shauna said Katie told her friend Monica, you remember Monica, works at the salon, that they'd be able to afford anything they want by this weekend. This weekend, Richard. Friday, 3 days from now. Right in line with Dr. Patel's initial timeline. "They've been planning this," I said. "For a while, I think. James has been pushing for us to move into assisted living for 6 months. And remember last Christmas when he suggested we should simplify our finances?" I did remember. He'd cornered me in my own study, drink in hand, and laid out this whole pitch about how we should put everything in a trust with him as executor. For tax purposes, he'd said, estate planning, making things easier for everyone. Margaret had shut it down before I'd even fully understood what he was asking. She'd walked into the study, taken one look at James's earnest face and my confused expression, and said, "Absolutely not. Now dinner's ready." "You knew," I said. "Back then you already knew." I suspected. Her voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. "Richard, there's something else. I've been keeping track of things. Documents. Records. I didn't want to worry you until I was sure, but what? James has been trying to move money. Our money. Small amounts at first. Transfers I only noticed because I checked the statements carefully. He's got power of attorney forms drafted. I found copies in his briefcase last Thanksgiving when I was looking for aspirin. He's been positioning himself to take control of everything." My hands tightened on the phone. "How long have you known?" "While you're here, hit the hype button, don't forget to subscribe and support this channel with a like. And tell us below. Have you ever faced something like this?" 6 months, maybe longer. I've been collecting evidence, saving every document, every email. I even hired a private investigator to follow him for a week. Margaret, I know, I should have told you. Maybe I was seeing threats where there weren't any. And then today happened, and I realized I wasn't paranoid enough. I processed this. My wife had been running a counterintelligence operation against our own son for half a year, and I'd been completely oblivious. What did the investigator find? James met with Dale twice in the last month. Dale's his business partner, and from what I could gather, they've been discussing investment opportunities that require significant capital injection in the near future. James told Dale the money would be available within the month. Dale Hutchins, James's business partner in whatever consulting firm they ran. Nervous type, sweated a lot. I'd met him a few times at company parties and gotten the impression of a man perpetually worried about something. So James has been promising Dale my money. Our money, Margaret corrected. And yes, which means if you suddenly don't die on schedule, Dale is going to have questions, uncomfortable questions. Good, I said. Good? Let him sweat. Let them both sweat. We know what they're planning now, so we plan better. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then, Luther's coming at 9. I'll be there at 8:30. We'll figure out our next move. Margaret? Yes? I love you. Her voice softened. I love you too. Now get some rest. Tomorrow we go to work. She hung up. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling tiles. 63 years old, definitely angry, and apparently married to a woman who'd make a decent spy. I smiled in the dark. James had no idea what was coming. Finally, around 4 in the morning, I managed to fall asleep. I dreamed about the old days, back when I was running the construction company. We'd built a subdivision outside of Nashua, 40 houses in 18 months. James had been maybe 10 years old, and I'd brought him to the site one Saturday. Let him wear a little hard hat and carry a hammer. He'd been so excited, running around asking questions about everything. When I grow up, I want to build things like you, Dad, he'd said. I woke up with that memory sharp in my mind and a bitter taste in my mouth. When had that changed? When had my son stopped wanting to build things and started just wanting to take them? A nurse came in around 6 to take my vitals. Heart rate was elevated, but nothing critical. She made notes on her tablet and told me the doctor would be by around 8 to discuss test results. Your wife called, she added. Said she'd pick you up around 9:30 if you're cleared to leave. Thanks. I ate the hospital breakfast, eggs that tasted like cardboard, toast that could double as a weapon, coffee that was mostly hot water. I'd had worse. I'd eaten lunch sitting on roof beams in July heat and dinner standing up in the rain. Hospital food was nothing. Dr. Patel came by at 8:15, younger resident in tow again. Mr. Brennan, good news. The follow-up tests look much better. We think the initial readings were compromised. Possibly a lab error, possibly just an anomaly. Your heart is stressed, but you're not in immediate danger. Not today, he said with a smile. We'd like to start you on some medication, keep monitoring you, but you should have considerably more than 3 days. Months, certainly. Years, if you take care of yourself. The resident chimed in. You'll need to make some lifestyle changes. Diet, exercise, stress management. Stress management. Right. When can I leave? I asked. This morning. We'll get your discharge papers ready. Take it easy for a few days. Come back next week for a follow-up. They left. I got dressed in the clothes Margaret had brought yesterday. Jeans, a flannel shirt, work boots. Felt more like myself than I had in the hospital gown. My phone rang. Bob Hutchins, my lawyer, no relation to Dale. Richard, got your email. What's going on? Need to make some changes to my will and estate plan. How fast can we meet? Today, if it's urgent. I've got an opening at 2. Take it. I'll be there. Next call was David Chen from Harris and Associates. Mr. Brennan, I saw your email. Is everything all right? Need to restructure some things. Move assets around. Can we meet today? I can make time. How's 11? Perfect. I hung up and sat on the edge of the hospital bed. My phone showed 8:45. Margaret would be here soon. Luther would be at the house at 9. 3 days. That's what James thought he had to wait. I was going to give him a different kind of countdown. Margaret arrived at 9 on the dot, walked into my hospital room like she owned it, signed the discharge papers, and wheeled me out herself, despite my protests that I could walk fine. "Hospital policy," she said. "Don't argue." We got to the car, our old Ford F-150, bought used 12 years ago and still running strong. Margaret drove. She always drove when she had something on her mind. "Luther's already at the house," she said as we pulled out of the parking lot. "And I called Shauna, told her you were doing better but that we'd appreciate if she kept it quiet for now, that we wanted to see how James reacted to the news." "Did she agree?" Margaret snorted. "She agreed to try. With Shauna, that's the best we can hope for." The drive home took 20 minutes. We lived in a neighborhood that was half rural, half suburban, houses on decent-sized lots, woods between properties, quiet streets. I'd built our house in 1987 when Margaret got pregnant with James. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, 2-car garage. Solar panels I'd installed myself 5 years ago. Garden out back that Margaret tended like it was her other child. Luther's truck was in the driveway. Big diesel Ford, newer than ours. He'd done well for himself. We went inside. Luther was sitting at the kitchen table, coffee mug in front of him, looking like he'd aged overnight. He was my age, give or take, built like a fire hydrant, short, solid, with hands that looked like they could crush concrete. Gray hair cut military short. He'd been in the Marines before coming to work for me. "Richard." He stood up, shook my hand. "You look like hell." "Feel like it too. Thanks for coming." Margaret said it was important. He glanced at her. "She also said it involves your son." Margaret closed the door and locked it. "It does. Richard, show him the text." I pulled out my phone and showed Luther the conversation from yesterday. His face darkened as he read. "That little bastard." "That's my son you're talking about," I said mildly. "Your son's a little bastard," Luther corrected. "Jesus, Richard. I knew James was ambitious, but this?" Margaret poured herself coffee. "It gets worse. Tell him, Richard." I told him. All of it. The power of attorney forms, the meetings with Dale, Katie's Instagram posts about yachts and new chapters, the way James had been pushing us toward assisted living. Luther listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "How much does James know about your business dealings?" he finally asked. "Most of it. He's seen the books, knows about the investments. Why?" "Because he's been using your reputation." Luther pulled out his own phone and scrolled through something. "I've got a buddy who works at Dale's firm. Called him this morning after Margaret reached out. James has been telling people you're backing his deals, using your name to get investors interested." Margaret set her mug down hard enough that coffee sloshed. "What?" "He's been playing the 'my father's a successful builder' card, implying that family money is behind his projects. It's not illegal, he's not forging documents or anything, but it's sleazy as hell, and the moment you actually die, he plans to cash in the estate and use it to cover promises he's already made." "How much has he promised?" I asked. Luther checked his phone. "From what my buddy says, north of 40 million. My vision grayed at the edges. He's already spent money he doesn't have. Not spent, promised, but yeah, essentially, which means if you don't die on schedule, James is going to have a lot of angry investors asking questions he can't answer." Margaret started pacing. "So we have leverage." "What kind of leverage?" I asked. She stopped and looked at both of us. "The kind where we let him keep digging his own grave. Richard, you said you have meetings today with your lawyer and financial advisor." 2 and 11. "Good. Move everything. Put it in a trust, put it in my name, I don't care. Make it so James can't touch a penny. Then we wait." "Wait for what?" "For him to fall apart." Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "He's counting on that inheritance. He's made promises based on that inheritance. So we let him keep counting, keep promising, and then we pull the rug out." Luther leaned back in his chair. "That's cold." Fair point. We spent the next hour planning. Luther made calls to people he knew in the business community. Margaret compiled her documents into a neat folder. At 10:30, my phone buzzed. Text from James. Heard you're getting released today. I'll stop by tonight to check on you. Jay. I showed it to Margaret. Perfect, she said. Tell him that's fine. I texted back. Okay. Then I drove to my meeting with David. Harris and Associates occupied the third floor of a bland office building downtown. David met me in the lobby personally, shook my hand, led me back to his office. He was 40, maybe, with the kind of trim beard that probably required actual maintenance. Suit that cost more than my truck. Mr. Brennan, what can I do for you? I want to restructure my estate, move assets into a charitable trust. His eyebrows went up. A charitable trust? May I ask why? Personal reasons. How fast can it be done? Well, it depends on the complexity. If you want it done right, we're looking at a few weeks to draft documents, establish the trust, transfer assets. I need it done faster. David hesitated. Mr. Brennan, these things take time. There are legal requirements, tax implications. I don't care about implications. I care about my money being protected, and I want it done this week. The rock came through our bedroom window at 2:17 in the morning. I woke to the sound of shattering glass and Margaret screaming. My first thought was earthquake, but we don't get earthquakes in New England. My second thought was gunshot, which got me moving fast. Stay down, I yelled, rolling out of bed and onto the floor. Margaret was already there, pressed against the side of the bed frame. The rock, because that's what it was, a fist-sized chunk of granite, lay on our bedroom floor surrounded by glass shards. Paper wrapped around it, secured with a rubber band. I crawled over, grabbed it, unwrapped the paper. Give me what's mine. Block letters. Black marker. No signature needed. Margaret's face was white. James. Probably. I checked the window. No one outside that I could see. Call the police. She did, hands shaking as she dialed. I grabbed my phone and called Luther. Richard, it's 2 a.m. Someone threw a rock through our window. Message threatening us. Need you here now. On my way. The police arrived first. 2 officers, both young enough to be my grandkids. They took statements, photographed the rock and the broken window, searched the yard with flashlights. Any idea who might do this? The older officer asked. My son, I said flatly. His partner blinked. Your son? We're in a dispute over my estate. He's not happy about it. That's not usually grounds for vandalism. Read the note. He did. Frowned. This is pretty aggressive. You want to press charges? If you can prove it was him. We'll check for prints on the rock. But unless you have security footage or witnesses... We've got cameras, Margaret said. She'd thrown on a robe and was remarkably calm considering. They're old, but they work. She showed them how to access the security footage. The officers watched it on Margaret's phone, and I saw their expressions change. Well, the younger one said, that's pretty clear. They showed me. The footage showed a figure approaching the house around 2:15. Medium height, wearing dark clothes and a hood. The figure picked up something from our landscaping rocks, wound up, and threw it through the window. Then ran. You can't see the face, I said. No, but we can see the body type, the way they move. And look here. The officer rewound the footage. When they turn, you can see their shoes. Those are expensive. Dress shoes, not sneakers. Who wears dress shoes to commit vandalism? Someone who didn't plan it, Margaret said. Someone who acted impulsively. Exactly. We'll take this footage, see if we can enhance it. In the meantime, I'd recommend staying somewhere else tonight. This is our home, I said. I understand, sir, but if your son is escalating to property damage, there's no telling what he might do next. Luther arrived while the police were still there, took one look at the broken window and Margaret's face and said, That's it. I'm staying. Luther. Don't argue. I'm crashing on your couch until this gets resolved. You need someone here, Richard. I couldn't argue with that. The police left around 4. Luther helped me board up the window with plywood from the garage. Margaret made coffee because none of us were sleeping anymore. We sat around the kitchen table as sunrise started painting the sky pink. He's losing control, Margaret said quietly. Or finding it, Luther countered. Throwing a rock is amateur hour. What worries me is what comes next. You think he'll do more? I think he's desperate. Dale told me James is looking at financial ruin. His business is collapsing. Katie's freaking out. He's got investors demanding money he doesn't have. And his parents, the people who were supposed to die and solve all his problems, are alive and actively destroying him. We're not destroying him, I said. We're just not saving him. Same difference from his perspective. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. You think you've won? You haven't. This isn't over. Jay. I showed it to them. Save that, Luther said immediately. Evidence. Everything he does, every threat he makes, save it. I'm calling Bob, Margaret said, already dialing. Bob answered on the 3rd ring, voice rough with sleep. This better be good. James threw a rock through our window at 2 a.m. with a threatening note. Police have the footage. Jesus Christ. Okay, here's what we do. File for a restraining order first thing this morning. Use the footage, the text messages, everything. Judge will grant it, and then if James comes near you, he gets arrested. How fast can you file? I'll have my assistant do the paperwork as soon as the office opens. We can probably get an emergency hearing today. After Bob hung up, we sat in silence. The coffee was strong, but I barely tasted it. Outside, birds were starting their morning songs. Normal world carrying on like my son hadn't just committed a crime. I keep thinking, I said, about when he was little. He had nightmares sometimes. Would come into our room crying about monsters. I'd walk him back to bed, check under it, check the closet, tell him there were no monsters, that he was safe. Margaret's hand found mine. Richard. He'd believe me. Go right back to sleep. Because I was his dad, and dads protect you from monsters. I looked at the boarded-up window. What happens when you realize your kid is the monster? You protect yourself, Luther said quietly. That's all you can do. At 8, Bob called back. Restraining orders being filed now. Hearings at 2 this afternoon. Both of you need to be there. We got ready in silence. I shaved, put on a clean shirt, tried to look like a competent adult whose son hadn't just thrown a rock through his window. Margaret wore her court outfit, conservative dress, minimal jewelry, no nonsense. Luther drove us to the courthouse. Bob met us outside. They're calling it an ex parte hearing since there's immediate danger. James will get notice after the fact. Will he be there? Depends on how fast his lawyer gets the message. Either way, we're getting the order. The hearing took less than 30 minutes. Judge Warren was maybe 60, gray-haired, with the tired expression of someone who'd seen everything twice. She reviewed the police report, watched the security footage, read James's text message. Mr. Brennan, she said, this is your son? Yes, Your Honor. And you're asking for a restraining order against him? I am. Do you believe he's a danger to you or your wife? I thought about the rock, the note, the escalating desperation. Yes. Granted. Mr. James Brennan is prohibited from contacting you directly or indirectly, from coming within 500 feet of your property, and from any form of harassment or intimidation. Violation will result in arrest. She signed the order. This is effective immediately. We left the courthouse with legal protection that felt flimsy as tissue paper. He's not going to care about a restraining order, I said. He'll care about jail, Bob countered. One violation and he gets arrested. That'll put a damper on his reputation. We drove home. Luther insisted on checking the house before we went in, walking through room by room like he expected James to be hiding in a closet. "Clear," he finally said. Margaret made lunch. I couldn't eat, just pushed food around my plate while my mind raced. My phone rang. James. I put it on speaker so Margaret and Luther could hear. "Dad. You violated the restraining order by calling me. This conversation is being recorded. I don't care about your restraining order. I care about fixing what you've broken." "I haven't broken anything." "You've ruined my life. My business is collapsing. Katie's leaving me. I've got investors threatening to sue, all because you decided to throw a temper tantrum over something I said in the hospital." I was in shock. He was screaming now. "People say stupid things when they're in shock. You're destroying me over nothing. You threw a rock through my window last night. I don't know what you're talking about." "We have footage." Silence. Then, "That wasn't me. We'll let the police determine that. Dad, please just listen. I made mistakes. I said things I shouldn't have. But I'm your son. Your only son. Do you understand that? I'm losing everything. So was I. You were counting on me to die. I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it, James? When you stood in that hospital room and said, 'Finally, this day has come,' how exactly did you mean that?" More silence. "That's what I thought," I said. "Don't call again." I hung up. My hands were shaking. "That was hard," Margaret said. "That was necessary." But my voice broke on the last word. Luther stood. "I'm going to call the police. Let them know about the call." He admitted he was there, or at least didn't deny it convincingly. While Luther made the call, Margaret pulled me into a hug. I held her and tried not to cry. Failed at the trying part. "He's still my boy," I said into her shoulder. "I know. I taught him to ride a bike." "I know. How did we get here?" She pulled back, looked at me. "Richard, we didn't do this. He did. Every choice was his. You need to remember that." But it didn't feel that simple. It felt like we'd all made choices that led here, and none of them were right. The police came again, took statements about the phone call, told us James's lawyer had called them claiming the security footage was inconclusive. "Is it?" I asked. "It's not conclusive," the officer admitted. "We can't see his face, but combined with the timing, the threats, his history, it's enough for us to bring him in for questioning." "When?" "Tomorrow morning. We wanted to give him time to get a lawyer present." After they left, the three of us just sat, exhausted, wrung out. Around 6, Shauna called Margaret. I could hear her half of the conversation. "Yes, we're fine. No, just some vandalism. We don't know for sure. Thank you, but we're okay." After she hung up, "Shauna heard about the rock. Wants to organize a neighborhood watch." "Good," Luther said. "More eyes, better security." Also, Katie posted on Instagram. She's claiming we've been threatening James, that we called the police on him for no reason, that we're the ones harassing them. I laughed, couldn't help it. She's really committed to this narrative. Let her be. Every post she makes just gives us more evidence of their coordination. Bob will love it. We ate dinner. Luther insisted on cooking, some kind of pasta thing that was actually pretty good. Afterward, Margaret and I did dishes while Luther made calls. "Richard," Margaret said quietly, washing a plate. "What do you want to happen here?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what's the end game? We've cut James out of the will. We've got a restraining order. His business is failing. At what point do we... I don't know. Stop?" "Do you want to stop?" She was quiet for a long moment. Part of me wants to keep going until he's completely destroyed, until he understands how much he hurt us. But part of me wonders if we've already done enough. What does enough look like? I don't know. Maybe when he genuinely apologizes. Maybe when he shows real remorse instead of just anger at getting caught. And if he never does, then we live with our choices, and he lives with his. My phone buzzed. Email from David at Harris & Associates. "Mr. Brennan, Wanted to update you. The trust is fully established and funded. All transfers are complete. Your estate is now protected. David. I showed Margaret. It's done, she said. It's done. We finished the dishes, moved to the living room where Luther was watching the news with the sound off. Margaret sat beside me on the couch, her hand in mine. 3 days, I said. What? 3 days ago, I was in a hospital bed thinking I might die. Now I'm sitting here with a restraining order against my son. Life comes at you fast, Luther said without looking away from the TV. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. Hello? Mr. Brennan? A woman's voice, vaguely familiar. This is Patricia from the bank. I'm calling after hours because I thought you should know. Someone tried to access your accounts today. Used old login credentials. We blocked it, but the attempts came from an IP address registered to James Brennan. He tried to hack my accounts? We're classifying it as unauthorized access attempt. I've added extra security protocols, but you should probably change all your passwords. And you might want to inform the police. Thank you. After I hung up, I told Margaret and Luther. He's desperate, Luther said. Getting sloppy. That's when people make mistakes. Or when they do something really stupid, Margaret countered. We stayed up late. Luther slept on the couch. Margaret and I went to bed around midnight, but I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me tense. Every car passing by could be James. Around 3, I gave up and went downstairs. Found Luther already awake, sitting in the dark living room with a view of the front door. Can't sleep either? He asked. Nope. Want coffee? Sure. We sat in the kitchen drinking coffee and watching the clock tick toward dawn. You ever regret having kids? I asked. Luther had 2 daughters, both grown and living out of state. Sometimes, but mostly no, they turned out good. What if they hadn't? Then I'd deal with it, like you're dealing with it. Doesn't feel like dealing, feels like drowning. Same thing sometimes. Dawn came. Margaret got up, made breakfast. We ate like robots, just fueling up for whatever came next. At 9, Bob called. James's lawyer filed a motion to overturn the will, claims you weren't competent, that Margaret coerced you, that the whole thing was done under duress. Can they do that? They can try. Won't get far, but it'll drag things out. Expect a hearing in about 3 weeks. 3 weeks? Yeah, but don't worry. We've got Dr. Morrison's evaluation. We've got witnesses from the dinner party. We've got evidence of James's threats. The motion will get denied. And until then, stay safe. Don't engage with James. Document everything. And for God's sake, don't do anything that could be construed as aggressive or retaliatory. After Bob hung up, I looked at Margaret. 3 more weeks of this. 3 more weeks of making sure we win, she corrected. The day dragged. I tried to work in the garden but couldn't focus. Tried to read but the words wouldn't stick. Finally just sat on the porch and watched the neighborhood go by. Around 2, a car pulled up. Katie got out. Luther was beside me in seconds. Stay here. He went down to meet her. I could hear their conversation. I need to see Richard and Margaret. They don't want to see you. I don't care what they want. They're destroying my family. Your husband threw a rock through their window. That's a lie. James would never. We have footage. Then it's faked. You people are crazy. All of you. Richard's old and senile, and Margaret's manipulating him for money. Katie. Luther's voice went hard. Get back in your car. Now. Or what? Or I call the police and you get arrested for violating a restraining order. I'm not the one with the restraining order. Family members count. You're covered under the same order. So unless you want to spend the night in jail, get in your car and drive away. She glared at him. Then at me, sitting on the porch. You're destroying him, she yelled. He's your son and you're destroying him. He destroyed himself, I called back. She got in her car, peeled out so fast she left tire marks. Luther came back up. That was fun. Should we call the police? Probably. Add it to the list. Margaret did. The police seemed less interested this time. Apparently screaming at someone from their car wasn't technically a crime, but they noted it in the report. That evening, Dale showed up, looking worse than before, pale, sweating, hands shaking. "Mr. Brennan, I need to tell you something." We let him in. Margaret made tea. Dale sat at the kitchen table looking like he might be sick. "James called me today," he said. "Told me he's planning something. Wouldn't say what, but he was different. Calm. Too calm. Like he'd made some kind of decision." "What kind of decision?" Luther asked. "I don't know. But he said, 'This ends Friday.' Those were his words. 'This ends Friday.'" Margaret and I looked at each other. "Friday's 3 days away," she said. 3 days. "What do you think he means?" I asked Dale. "I don't know. But Richard, I've known James for 5 years. I've never heard him sound like he did on that call. He wasn't angry. He wasn't desperate. He was resolved, like he'd found an answer to a problem." "Should we be worried?" Margaret asked. Dale looked at her. "Yes, you should be very worried.